welcome everybody. Thanks John Shook, Jamie Bonini for joining me this morning. We want to have a conversation about an upcoming joint activity between Toyota and the Lean Enterprise Institute. We call this the U.S. Lean Leadership Tour. It's going to take place this year in Kentucky. We'll be visiting 3 sites: GE Appliances, Toyota Motor Company, and Summit Polymers. The dates this year are October 7th through the 11th. So a week-long learning tour focused on Lean TPS, and we invite everyone that can to come along with us. So we're gonna have a conversation this morning about, in sort of preparation for that tour, ask Jamie and John, who will be 2 leaders of the tour, to describe the experience that they've had on previous tours and kind of highlight some of the key aspects of the upcoming tour for those that may be interested. So excited to have you guys with me this morning. Quite honored, actually, to be able to have this conversation and bring this conversation to those who may be interested. So with that, why don't we jump right into the conversation? So thanks, Jamie and John, for joining us this morning. We want to talk about the upcoming Lean Leadership Tour happening in Kentucky in October. Visiting Toyota, Summit Polymers, GE Appliances. A couple of questions for you both. I'll start with you, Jamie. So what is it that you think makes this training unique and valuable? What differentiates it from other training that might be offered?
Well, what's happening on this particular learning tour is we're going to see 3 organizations that are in different stages, different lengths along their journey to try to build the TPS culture. And so we'll see that evolution on that spectrum, different years of practice. We'll also see 2 brownfield sites and 1 greenfield site. So the Toyota factory started with TPS from the very beginning. That was brought up. And GE and Summit were conversion sites. GE has been at it about a decade and Summit about 25 years. So I think that's very unique for executives, leaders to see organizations that are in different phases or depth. And then the second key point is they're going to see different types of actual practices on the shop floor that we found have made it cumulatively made TPS more understandable for the participants. So those 2 things.
That's a good question, I guess. One thought that comes to mind is just the intense nature of an entire week of going to see some sites that are various stages of their lean journey. Being able to do that right here in the U.S. is worth remarking on. So I've had the privilege of being associated with LEI for the last 10, 15 plus years. And my last job with Toyota was actually to help start TSSC 25 years ago. And we talked about it at the time because we used to take a lot of people to Japan. And at that time, 25 years ago, that was the only place to go to really see some exemplary sites where you could see something and reflect on your own situation. And we, at that time, we dreamed of a time when you could do the very same thing right here in the US of A. And so here we are. And we're able to visit GE Appliances in Louisville, Toyota Georgetown, Summit Polymers about an hour outside of Georgetown. And you can see so much. And we're going to have an opportunity to go and see right on the plant floor, to meet and talk to people, and then step back and reflect on our own situation. So to be able to do all that together without traveling to Japan, I think makes this a very unique opportunity.
That sounds interesting. So are attendees going to see only technical tools in action, or will they also see social behaviors?
There's huge misunderstandings about the Toyota production system that we're working very hard to clarify in this tour. So we define the Toyota production system as an organizational culture. It's organizational, not just manufacturing. And it's a culture of highly engaged people solving problems to drive performance, culture of engagement driving performance. They're going to see that in all 3 places. Regarding the technical tools, this culture is created and sustained by the system, and the system has 3 elements. 1/3 is a philosophy, 1/3 is technical tools, and 1/3 is the managerial or the leadership role, which is to design an organizational structure that is capable of solving one-by-one problems as they occur. So for this tour, we're really going to emphasize probably more the managerial role than the technical tools, And we'll be able to see that managerial role in 3 different sites.
So to expand on Jamie's response here just a little bit, it's worth noting that you mentioned technical tools only. And one of the misunderstandings I think we want to correct is one, in fact, that as Jamie mentioned, is the fact that all those technical tools of TPS are actually social tools at the same time when we use them correctly. Think of any of the technical tools of Lean that you may have learned, that any of us may have learned. And we often apply them only halfway, which is the technical use. All of them enable a social dimension of how we should behave as well. So whether you're thinking about the Kanban, for example, where you're taking responsibility for the action of using the Kanban to do Kaizen down at the level of where the work is taking place, so that you're cascading responsibility to that level. So the powerful thing about all these Lean tools, these TPS tools, is that they are both social and technical. And if you only use the technical side, you're missing out on half the value, which means you're probably missing out on more than that because you're not going to be able to get the full value out of them. So that's one of the things that we're going to be able to experience throughout that week. So we'll look at a lot of misconceptions around the managerial side, around how people keep their mind on purpose as they use the tools, not just copy them, and not just copy and use the technical side, but also the social side. So I think there's a good blend throughout the week of looking at the social and the technical. And I think, again, that's one of the powerful things that we'll be able to experience together.
So you mentioned earlier that Toyota in Kentucky, Summit Polymer, and GE Appliances have kind of been at this for different amounts of time, 10 years or so for GE Appliances, 25 for Summit, and then over 30 there at TMMK. So what I guess is the value for learners to see that kind of variety?
One thing that's powerful about that variety is that it's no accident that the number is 3. I mean, anytime you see one of one thing, you've seen one. You see one snowflake, you've seen one. And you can't place it with any kind of perspective in a broader scheme of things. Even if you see 2, that really doesn't give you the ability to do what you can do with 3, which is to triangulate. And that's it's a term of geometry, and also something the surveyors do, because you can't place yourself with perspective unless you see 3 things. So the difference between seeing 4 versus 3 is not so great, but seeing 3 is really important. So you get to see GE Appliances, which has been at this for 10 plus years. They're also part of the GE organization, which is over 100 years old. And they were undertaking a massive transformation that started a little over 10 years ago. So we can see what they've been through, not only what they are today, they'll tell the story of their journey. And then at Georgetown, we'll see an organization that was designed to be Lean from the ground from day one, and was built really on bringing a fully mature system from Japan. And Summit Polymers, which actually was a greenfield. Summit Polymers came to TSSC as it was building the plant in Mount Sterling, Kentucky. It said, we're just about to build this thing in order to supply Georgetown. So why don't you help us make it to be the way it should be from the very beginning? So all they had in the beginning was 4 walls and a floor. And so they've been going on quite a journey of the last couple of decades as well. So being able to see all 3 enables you to understand more deeply, but then also to relate that back to whatever your circumstance may be. I think seeing those 3 is very important.
Here's what I've learned about the value for the learners. We've done this a few times, and we've all had a chance to debrief with the participants at the end of the week. And the feedback has been very positive about seeing that evolution and seeing different organizations at different state. But I think vastly more important is I've had a chance to visit a number of the companies several months afterwards and ask them what is of value 3 to 4 months later. And universally, what I've heard from everyone is seeing organizations that are different stages of evolution helps them get a better image about how this might evolve in their case. And that they don't have to start with the expectation a short period of time they're going to be at a highly advanced state like the Toyota factory,
sure,
which has been at this at a long time, that there's a journey and there are milestones along the journey, and there's things to look for as that progresses. So I think that would be most important from what we've gotten from the participants.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely heard from people who have visited companies that are far along along their path, I guess, and that can be kind of intimidating. Almost like how could we possibly achieve that state? So I guess to see various companies at different points along that sort of journey can be helpful, more relatable.
And I would add to that, Josh, that seeing a company that's in advanced state and seeing what they're doing, listening to what they have to say, that's very often that there are some fundamental building blocks that they take for granted tacitly that are fundamental towards the early phase of a journey. And it can be a little deceptive if you go to an organization like a Toyota factory that's been at a long time to not really see or grasp sort of some foundational items that they take for granted.
So let's see. So this is, I guess, the second year for Toyota and the Lean Enterprise Institute to partner on this activity. When this activity began, what, in your view, what was the sort of problem that Toyota and LEI were trying to solve by offering this experience?
So I think the purpose of offering this, or the problem we're trying to solve, one, it's a great opportunity for LEI and Toyota to be able to cooperate and work together. Each organization can bring its own strengths, and we offer those strengths to the participants throughout the week in the form of observations as we're walking along side by side, looking at these companies, and also in the reflections that we'll be doing every day.
I think that what hadn't been done before was a workshop that showed organizations that were at a different evolution in their journey in a one compressed week in tight succession. To my knowledge, that hasn't been done before. And we thought we wanted to see how that would play out for participants to help them with their learning. And the second thing that I don't think's been done before is that we're seeing a set of TPS tools and practices that come together cumulatively at the end of the week. This is a good package deal with 2 assembly lines and then one sort of replenishment type system at Summit, which is a replenishment system with a lot production as well. So I think those 2 things, the evolution and the set of different practices, has made it very relatable and accessible for the participants. It worked out very well first year.
A broader problem to solve has to do with what Jamie mentioned earlier, which is a lot of misunderstandings out there. And even if you set the misunderstandings aside, I think what often happens is people may have some conceptual understanding of what Lean is or what the Toyota Way is or TPS, but what they should do is a very different matter. There's a professor at Stanford whose work I tend to like quite a lot, Professor Sutton, who talks about the knowing versus doing gap. And I think this is a huge gap in the United States and actually in industry, where we have a lot of smart leaders who take executive education courses and read books and understand a lot of things such as TPS conceptually, or they read the books of lean thinking, but they don't know what they should do. So this gives people an opportunity to really connect that, the concept, the underlying philosophies, with how that translates into their behavioral changes on their own behalf, and what kind of systems and work processes they can put in place in their companies.
So thinking about many tours to factories, those, the tourists spend a lot of time on trams or up on catwalks. Will that also be the case in this experience, or will folks get the opportunity to get a little closer to the action, so to speak?
So we're really lucky this week in that all 3 of the companies have agreed to let us really get out and get on the floor and see what's actually happening. I don't think we'll be actually kicking machines, but we'll be close enough to them that we could. And we'll be right there where the action is. And as we see what's happening, we'll try to focus on that. And then we step back and we're able to reflect on it afterwards as well. So this is not just a drive-by tourism, industrial tourism. This is something where we're able to really get inside and see what happens and reflect on it.
Yeah, so you mentioned, this is a week-long experience. It's a lot of time for folks to commit. But what is it about that sort of length of time that adds value in this instance?
Well, it's funny, we can experience something or read something and think we know it, but sometimes you need soak time, you need to sleep on it. And it's helpful to be able to sit back and then discuss it with someone. One of the powerful things that happens during this week is you're able to reflect alongside other learners people from other companies. Sometimes it's a very similar industry to yours, sometimes something very different, and you're able to share your reflections, your thoughts. So you can do that both with us from LEI and from Toyota, but also with each other. And that takes a little bit of time. What we're finding is that people are also interested after the week in connecting afterwards, because sometimes 2 weeks later, 3 months goes by and you have additional thoughts. You remember some experience or something you saw during that week, and you want to have someone to be able to talk about that with. And the fact that people stay in contact with each other and with us is one, I think something that speaks to the power of that week, but also the fact that just 1 day or 2 days isn't really enough. You need that soak time to really sit back and be able to reflect, so that the learnings truly become deepened and deeply embedded in each learner.
Well, in terms of the length of time, I think the way to value that, to assess that, is based on feedback we've gotten participants that have been through this, which we've asked them, is this too long? Is this too short? What makes the most sense? And what we've, at least certainly what I've heard from all the participants, that the timing made good sense. We spent 3 full days at different factories with a pretty extensive tour and debrief. They cumulatively build upon each other, and then, which has been designed that way. And then we kick it off with a half day on Monday and a half day debrief, and tying everything together on Friday. So it is a full week, and the feedback from the participants has been very positive. That was about right, and that's why we're continuing that that duration. And I do want to add, Josh, that our target for this is senior leaders. This is a leadership tour, not sort of a practitioner tour. It's really for leaders to understand the leadership role in trying to plan a transformation.
Yeah, it's a good thing to mention. I was going to ask if there was in fact an intended sort of target audience, and it sounds like there is. So, this is always something that I think about when I get to go out in the world and visit companies. If you were to give one practical tip to someone who's visiting any Gemba, whether that's in Kentucky as part of this tour or just at some other time, what would that practical tip be?
Well, it's a great question to think about, how we want to approach any Gemba. And I'll try to think of one tip to your question, Josh. But maybe it has a sort of a prerequisite. I think the first thing to do is to think about where you're going and why, and what your role is. So in this week, we're all going there as learners, but really we're practicing how to go to a Gemba, how to go to a place of work. And we always go there with a deep cognizance of our role. So I'm lucky, as we are at LEI and also at TSSC, to be able to visit a lot of organizations. And often we'll go into a company and into a factory or into a retail operation, and we're never going to go back. It's going to be a one-day experience, and the people there will never see us again. So that's one role that we might have. Another is that I may be an executive with a company. I may be visiting this operation once a year. I may be with some central OpEx group where I go every quarter or more often. Or I may be an executive who has direct responsibility for this work site. And we always need to think, what is our role, and what do we think our role will be in the future? So that's the first thing to keep in mind. And then associated with that, what do I want to accomplish today? I don't want to have a whole lot of preconceived notions of what I'm going to see, but am I going to just try to observe the things to give some of my thoughts? Am I going to try to leave some specific advice? I'll leave some homework. So what do I expect to get out of this visit today? I think those things are very, very important. Secondly, it's helpful for any time when we visit an operation to go and see, to have some problem consciousness of my own. What is it I want to learn? But it's very important to try to keep that out of the way as you're actually looking. It's very helpful to try to have an open mind, a beginner's mind, to see that operation and its problems and its challenges and its activities in it for its own right, without immediately always thinking about my own situation. That we often go to a place and try to think of best practices. I'm going to look for some best practices to take back. And that's a natural inclination when we have so many things we want to fix in our own companies. But it's better to be able to look at it and appreciate it in its own right. So if we can do that, then we can start to think of how we can bring all our senses to bear as we visit. So we use the term learning to see, and LEI published a book called Learning to See. We really like to use all our senses. So we want to see using our eyes. We want to hear using our ears. Even smell. Sometimes we're going to an operation where that makes a difference. Sometimes we go to restaurants. Touch. There are certainly places where you want to be careful about touching. It can be dangerous, but other times you want to touch the fabric of what people are working on. And you even develop a certain kind of a sixth sense when you can walk in and start to get a sense for what is the culture of this place. And you can sense that by just the sounds that you hear, the conversations you hear, and also the body language that you see, the faces. Are people smiling? What kind of conversations do people call out to you? So you develop kind of a sixth sense. But you can do that by truly being in the moment, not immediately thinking about your problems back home. Now, your problems back home are still important, but that's one nice thing about this week is we're able to see something, appreciate it in its own right, and then step back. And sometimes in the bus on the way back to the hotel, or in the evening over some bourbon, then reflect on what we've seen and what it might mean to us. So those are tips, I think, that you can always bring with you anytime you're visiting any Gemba, any work site, anywhere, no matter what your role is.
And understand the customer demand very clearly, so you can understand the stability of the shipping requirements and the tack time, and then view the shop floor with the tack time very clearly understood. That will guide a lot of productive questions when you're walking upstream.
So shipping being a step in the manufacturing process, I guess in a non-manufacturing process, just to find that sort of final step closest to the customer. Start there, understand the customer need, and then sort of work back is kind of what I'm hearing you say.
A very clear understanding of the customer requirements in terms of the product, the timing, and the delivery is fundamental to assessing a value stream in terms of what's working well or not so well to deliver on those customer requirements.
So obviously somebody who would come on a tour like this will be faced with the challenge about what to do upon returning to their company. So, do you have any advice for companies who are sort of facing that challenge of translating what they see at one company and bringing that back and applying that to their company?
So I'll emphasize again the fact that if you can find a way to compartmentalize, so that when you're visiting the Gemba of these companies, not to be just immediately constantly translating that into your problem, but appreciate their issues for what they are. Try to understand what problems they're trying to solve, and keep in mind the purpose that they have to try to make all the changes that they're making and applying the tools that they're using. So being able to do that at the same time, then step away later and think about what you've learned, and try to think not only about the tool that you saw, the specific actions you saw in place, but what problem they were trying to solve, and then take that to translating that into your problem and what that might be, and all the challenges that you have back at home. There'll be plenty of best practices that people will be able to see this week or anytime you visit a good company. But to look not just for best practices, but for kind of aha moments, for insights that are behind the practice that you actually see. So this is something I think that you can use in the following week when you go home. Think of what you can do that day. There'll be some longer term changes that you need to make, but what could you do that day, an action you could take that day? But try to keep that kind of thinking out of the moment when you're on the plant floor during the visit, and bring that to bear later. And we spend, in fact, Friday of that week focusing on the challenges of each company. So as we go through the first 4 days trying to just really learn, be an open-minded learner, we'll spend Friday thinking about what you can do when you go back. And hopefully you actually have something of a plan that you can begin to put into play Monday when you go back to work.
Yeah, the most important thing is to go back to your company and take some meaningful action. We find that learning the Toyota production system is about 10% conceptual understanding, which you can get by reading in seminars, 10% exposure by seeing sites that are doing this, which is what we're going to do during this week, which is great. And then 80% is hands-on application, like you would learn to ride a bicycle, or you learn to swim, or you'd learn to play chess. TPS is deeply and fundamentally learn by doing. So therefore, my biggest piece of advice is based on the insights from this tour, go back and take some meaningful action in your home environment wherever you are in your lean transformation, and that will deepen your understanding and ability to actually move forward in a practical way.
Is that the kind of thing that that you find is easy for people to do kind of on their own, or should they have help in some way?
Our experience is there are very, very few organizations that have been able to learn and apply the Toyota production system with much depth without high quality coaching or assistance. And I would call that support on site, because this is intentionally learned by doing. So in general, that's the approach that we have found most effective. However, I do think out of this learning tour, some folks could get some meaningful insights that could tweak and adjust and refine work that they're already doing, where they may not need or might not be appropriate where they're at this point in time to have some additional, on-site coaching or support. Certainly, we've designed this in a way that we hope that people will get those insights. And I think the most important insight is the leadership or managerial role, which is what most companies miss. Most organizations see the Toyota production system as a collection of technical tools that if we install the tools, we'll get the results. And that is a deep misconception. The technical tools are a third of the system. The philosophy is the other third, and the managerial role is the final third. And that's what we want to emphasize, the common missing elements that we think people can better understand through this week-long activity.
So those are sort of the questions that I had prepared. Is there anything else, Jamie, that you'd like to share with folks before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I think there would be two things, Josh. I think what is really powerful about this tour related to the sequence is we start off at GE Appliances, which has been at this for 10 years. They're making washing machines that they have reshored and brought back from Asian operations and been able to produce them now very competitively in North America. They're making these washing machines every 17 seconds is their takt time. So you get to see a high volume assembly line operation. And in that high volume pace, it's easy to see continuous flow, pull systems, takt time, and-on systems, Yamazumi work balance. It's very accessible to see some basic TPS practices, which is a great way to start the week, because then when we go to the Toyota factory, it's not 17 seconds, it's 60 seconds. And the cars are a lot bigger and more complex than washing machines, but there are more TPS practices in place. So we're able to sort of build upon what was at GE, go into another assembly line application at Toyota. That's worked extremely well. And then we go to Summit Polymers, which is they're making very small components, interior plastic components, and we get to see a smaller light assembly with a machine-intensive environment where we're injection molding. So I think that flow and that sequence for the week really works well for this learning to build upon each other throughout the week.
That's excellent. I know I've had the opportunity to visit all three of those sites, not in succession though, as you're describing, and I can definitely see how that accumulation of understanding and knowledge can build over time. So excited for folks who will sign up to get this experience. Thank you to you, Jamie, and Toyota for being our partners in this. We look forward to one more tour.
Yeah. Josh, I have one more thing I'd like to mention.
Oh, you bet.
Yeah. I may have said it before. I can't remember, so I'm going to repeat it.
Sure.
So for folks that join this tour, one thing we hope people will really understand at the end of the week is the definition of what is the Toyota production system, which there are lots of misunderstandings we found. The Toyota production system is an organizational culture of highly engaged people solving problems or innovating to drive performance. So it's a culture of engagement driving performance, and it's organizational wide. That culture is created by a system, and that system is like a three-legged stool. It has three pieces that have to work together: a philosophy about how to run the organization and treat your people that underlies some technical tools, principally under just-in-time and Jidoka, And finally, a leadership role, which is to design an organization and engage and develop people to solve problems to drive performance. So our goal in this workshop is that people can get exposure to that full triangle and really grasp that the Toyota production system is an organizational culture. And that is a common misunderstanding, that people see it as not organizational and not as a culture. And so hopefully we found great success at the end of this week that people get to see it that way through a cumulative set of experiences in different environments.
One more thing about visiting, I guess, visiting operations, visiting Gemba, is to always be respectful of the host. And again, this is something that applies not just to this week, but anytime we go somewhere. You know, what are their rules? What are the protocols that they have? And everywhere you go, people will tell you the safety rules. And that's okay, but also just stop and ask. Ask if it's okay to take photographs. Ask if it's okay to take video instead of just assuming that you can. Ask if there's anything that they would like you to know before you go out on the floor. Ask before you just start talking to the people who are doing work. Is it okay if I talk to you? And if you do talk to someone on the floor, recognize that you're interrupting them. Explain that you're not there to judge their work, but that you're there only to learn, and you're not really looking at them, you're looking at the work. So those are additional things I think to keep in mind, not only this week. We'll be trying to practice these things this week, but things that they're kind of practices that we can take with us when we go back home. Just finally, I think just again, to have an open mind for how impactful this may be on your thinking. You're probably thinking as you sign up for this that you want some best practices. I would encourage you to think about deeper insights, but be open to the idea that this could really have a profound change in you as a leader and the way you want to exercise your role and your basic thinking as a leader throughout the rest of your career. I think that's about the only final thing I would like to add. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks for taking the time to join us this morning and share a little bit about the tour.